All right, let's get started. So in the coming days, we're going to email you probably over the weekend a little URL. We'll use the Canvas system to notify everyone in the class. You'll go to a website and you'll just complete yes or no questions for 50 conditions. You'll be asked, is this a disease, yes or no? In your own opinion, there's no right or wrong answer. Is this a concern of doctors, yes or no? And then Dorothy will collate that data and send me the percentages. So I'll know like 10% of you think this and 20% of you think that about all these conditions. I've been doing this for 20 years. It prompts a lot of conversation. And then I'll show you your results as a class, not as individuals, on next week. And we'll frame it with the readings. I think you're reading Emily Martin's book next week. Is that right? I don't have the syllabus. The Woman in the Body. Is that right? Does anyone have the syllabus handy? No one has a syllabus handy? Can anyone look it up? I don't even know. I think you're doing Emily Martin next week. You must be if you're doing this. Yeah, I think you are. So anyway, it's a magnificent book. I remember when I read it as a student, and I still teach it, 35 years later. Okay, so last time we talked about a number of things. We saw the changes that had occurred over the last 100 years in medical care and in the causes of death. And we saw that most of the improvements in health seem to precede or be independent of advances in medical care. However remarkable those advances, truly were. And we saw this in a number of ways for a number of diseases and a number of historical periods. And these events, whatever their source, did not accrue evenly to all people. And there were widening differentials we saw some hints of by social class, by race, and by so on. Including in the recent past. And the tension between the treatment of individuals and of populations persists, trying to understand, how are we going to get a handle on what we mean by these topics? And I wanted to mention that, as usual today, I prepared remarks, but you can raise your hands, especially this class this size, and we can pause and take questions, and, it can be more authentic than just having me talk at you. Okay. So there are a number of ways of measuring socioeconomic status, and I'm going to use the concept loosely today, although we will focus on specifics. And the classic ways include things like, money, how much money do you have, your income or your wealth, education, occupation, because there are differences by occupational status and socioeconomic status. So an artist might be poor, but they might have high social status, for example. Or some other kind of status, either acquired or assigned status. Education offers the advantage that it is in principle accessible to everyone, to men and women alike, and it's also fixed early in life and kind of remains the same for the rest of your life. And so it suffers less from the problem of reverse causation that we'll get to in just a moment. So sometimes we don't know, does money cause health or does health cause money? That can be sometimes hard to tease out, but we can be more sure about, does education cause health or does health cause education? Because once you get your education, it stays the same for the rest of your life. And then we can see whether stratification by education affects subsequent health in individuals. We'll hear more about that in just a minute. And status can include all kinds of things, like being a descendant of the passengers on the Mayflower, right? In this country, some people trace their lineage to the, first British people to come over here, and that might be, let's say, high status. Or descendants of the first fleet in Australia. One of the funny things about going to Australia, I don't know if any of you are from there or have been there, but often the descendants of the convicts are seen as higher status as the descendants of the wardens. So the people were transported to Australia from England, and they hated the warders, right? So you're like a jerk child descendant of a warder, but I came over with the convicts, for example. Or you could be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. You wear a black turban instead of a white turban. I don't know if you guys knew this distinction, but if you trace your bloodline back to the Prophet, you get to wear a black turban. Or you could be an aristocrat, would be a kind of status. or you could be an Apple Mac user. That would be a high status as far as I'm concerned. Or you could, just have charisma, right? We all know people like this, right? Who are just charismatic. They have the way about them. They're different than you and me, right? We've all met human beings like that. And, no matter how poor or educated or anything else they have the way, okay? Some of them in ancient times might have been seen as a holy man or a holy woman, for example. And so there are different kinds of socioeconomic status you can have, as indicated here. Now, if you're poorer or less educated, you're clearly more likely to die. And this has been observed for a very long time. And there is pertinently a convincing gradient in this. So this slide shows the age-adjusted death rates in 25 to 64-year-olds according to education, income, race, and sex. Okay? So for example, if you're a white man and you don't graduate from high school, you have 7.6 deaths per thousand. If you graduate from high school, 4.3 deaths per thousand. A little bit of college doesn't change much, but if you complete college, you're even less likely to die. And this pattern holds in white men and in white women and in black women, but it's a little less sort of monotonic in black men for reasons I don't know. That completing a college education doesn't, you get them blips up there for a little bit. And you get a similar pattern for income. These data are old now, so these incomes look small, but regardless, there's a kind of gradient. As you get more and more income, you get less and less likely to die within each of these basic age by race demographic categories. And even just finishing college seems to yield some rate of return, okay? So like just making that final little step from 1 to 3 years of college to getting that fourth year of college seems to offer some advantages for longevity for all kinds of ways you could imagine that a college education might help you. It's not necessarily what you learn in your senior year, right? You take that last art history class or that last organic chemistry class or something. It's just the fact that you now have a college degree, maybe can earn more money, feel better about yourself or whatever, that allows you now to get these health benefits ostensibly. And this table shows something similar, but here in terms just of cardiovascular disease. This slide shows the age-adjusted death rates from heart disease in the same age group according to income, race, and sex. And so now you can look at, for example, amongst white men, and you can see, the number of deaths per 1,000 person years. So it's not just per 1,000 people over whatever lifetime, you normalize it by the number of years. So if you have 10 years and you have 10 years and you have 10 years, I could say over the next 30 years, one of you dies. That's one person per 30 person years, I would say, to do the calculation. And so you can look at, amongst white men, as they get richer, their probability of death goes down. And the same thing happens amongst black men. As they get richer, their probability of death goes down. And amongst white women and black women. But now we can do something else. We can compare ratios. So for example, amongst white men with this income, how much more likely are black men to die? So you take this number, 3.9, and divide it by this 3.2, and you get that black men of similar poor income are 21% more likely to die. But by the time their income equalizes, at the higher end of the spectrum, there's no black-white difference. So rich black men and rich white men have the same mortality rate from cardiovascular disease in these data. And you could do this for women as well and get similar picture that you see over here. Generally, you get less and less probability of death as you get richer. These numbers for women are all lower than these numbers for men. Why? Because women are less likely to die than men. They're very advantaged in this regard, women over men, in all societies in terms of longevity. And you can compute the ratios among women, and you might see that for women, it's more burdensome to be a black woman than a white woman, conditional on income in terms of the ratios. Like these ratios are higher than these ratios. Or you can compare by wealth, and you can look at, for example, the ratio of the lowest to the highest income. So if you compare 3.2 divided by 1.4, you get a ratio of 2.4, or 3.9 divided by 1.4, you get a ratio of 2.7, and you now can compare, okay, what's the relative impact, conditional on race and sex, of being poor versus being rich, in these categories. And one of the things you could notice if you look in this table is that the differences by class or income are actually much more pronounced than the race-based differences. So in other words, if you look down the table, what's really driving this is level of wealth. So yes, there is a racial difference, but the real driver, like these numbers, 2.4 and 2.7, are bigger than these numbers. Okay? So the ratio of the rich to the poor is a bigger difference than the ratio of the black to the white. And yet we spend a lot more time in our society talking about race, I think more than we should in general. But specifically with respect to health, the real driver is income in these data. Yes, I forgot your name. Merit. Yes, Merit. I'll get your names by the end. I guarantee it. Yes.
I was going to ask, what is the benefit of doing the per year analysis?
So if you had a heterogeneous group of people and you had a 50-year horizon, like he's 30 and you're 20, I wouldn't want to just count your deaths like he dies in 10 years and you die in 30 years, and I say, oh, each of you died. It's not quite the same. He had a certain number of years of exposure, and I forgot how I set it up, but you had more years of exposure. So I want to normalize it by the total number of years of opportunity to die. So I could have 1,000 people followed for 1 year each, or I could have 100 people followed for 10 years each, and then I could compute the number of deaths per year in those two populations, for example.
Okay, so you're studying everyone at the same, like within the same time frame, essentially.
Within the same time frame, or you're kind of normalizing it by the opportunity to observe the outcome of interest. So I could have 100 people followed for 10 years, and then count how many deaths. That'd be 1,000 person years of opportunity to die. Or I could have 1,000 people followed for 1 year. Same 1,000, exactly.
Okay.
So it's by person year instead of by person, instead of counting it.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad you're asking questions. Okay. And this is super precise information using income data for the US population obtained from 1.4 billion tax records between 1999 and 2014. And the mortality data were obtained from Social Security Administration death records, which are exquisitely precise. Believe me, the Social Security Administration knows right away when someone dies because they need to not send that dead person checks. So they know, and then so you can have, and the IRS knows your income pretty damn well. So these data were merged by these authors, and now we can look at a sample of individuals between 40 and 76 years with a mean age of 53 years, and median household earnings among working individuals in this sample was $61,000. And what we can find if we look at this, so here on the x-axis is the household income percentile, so there are 100 little dots here. And then so we look at the bottom 1% of men, and the second bottom 1%, and the third bottom 1%, and the top 1% of men. And then we can look at the expected age at death. If you're 40 years old, how much longer will you live? So for example, the bottom 1% of men, if they're 40 years old, they'll live to be 75. But the top 1% will live to be, 87.5 or whatever the number is. Okay? So you can see that women, once again, live longer than men. Not surprising. That's a regular feature in what we've been seeing. And you can see also that the slopes are a little bit different. So if you look at the slopes, you can see that men benefit more and more and more from more wealth, whereas women are not so much affected by greater and greater wealth. Okay? So there's something more intrinsic about sex here affecting mortality than wealth. Okay? But wealth is good for both groups. More money across the entire gradient. Okay? Now, it's important to ask yourself, why is this gradient linear? Like, for example, once you get to this point, maybe it's up and up and up till you get a certain minimum amount of money, and then it could be flat. There could be why would there be a difference between being at the 97th percentile versus the 98th percentile? It still gets better, right? Or it could even be parabolic. It's unlikely to, but you could speculate that the super rich are doing hang gliding and taking risks, for example, and they're dying at greater numbers. Or it could be a step function, right? Like it could be flat until you get to a certain minimum threshold and then step up, for example, okay? But generally we don't see that. Generally we see kind of smooth, monotonic increase, although there's a little hint of a step function here at the bottom, especially for men, right? So it seems to make a big difference to go from 1 to 2% and 2 to 3, and then the line starts, okay? So it's up a little bit, and then kind of a flat, smooth increase amongst both men and women. And men in the bottom 1% of the income distribution at the age of 40 years had an expected age of death of 72.7 years, and men in the top 1% had an expected age of death of 87.3 years, which is 14.6 extra years longer, which is huge. 14 years of life is a big, wonderful thing. Women in the bottom 1% at the age of 40 years had an expected age of death of 78.8, and women at the top of 88.9, they had an expected 10 years difference. And the gap in life expectancy between men and women was narrower at the higher income levels, whereas at the bottom it was, of course, wider. And once again, there have been widening differentials in recent decades between those at the top and those at the bottom. The rich are getting richer in terms of their ability to realize benefits from their wealth with respect to their health. Now, usually the direction of causation is taken to be from socioeconomic status to health. So in other words, we theorize that, okay, something about being at the higher end of the SES, however measured, confers advantages in terms of having health. And this is hypothesized to work in a variety of ways. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. What are some ways? How might higher SES be salubrious, improve your health? Thoughts? What's your name again? Sophia?
Lucy.
Lucy, okay. Who's Sophia? There's no Sophia. You're Sophia, thank you, right? Similar place right behind her. Okay, Lucy, yeah.
Maybe you can take more time off to go to the doctor and get medical care.
And did we learn last time that medical care makes a huge difference at the individual level?
No.
No, okay. But maybe that's what's happening. If you're richer, you have more opportunities to seek medical care. Sophia?
Better nutrition, because the wealthier people can afford to buy
Better food,
preservatives and
blah, blah. Okay, less toxins, more nutrients, okay. Nikki? And happiness makes you healthier?
Yeah.
And you think really money buys happiness?
I do.
I tell you, the most important thing in your life is who you choose as a life partner, which is a decision you're going to make in your 20s. And the smartest thing I did when I was 25 was fall in love with my wife, who's still my wife. And I don't know how the 25-year-old me had the smarts to make that choice that I made, but I did, and I'm very grateful for it. That's the main driver. Yeah. What's your name?
Danielle.
Danielle.
Yes. One of the readings for today talked about how reaching higher levels of education would lead to better self-management. So for diabetics and then also people with HIV, just like certain qualities that come with education will lead you to be like more on top of your medical regimen.
Yeah. So more educated people might be able to enact knowledge or desires better, and that's how SES with respect to managing their health. Exactly right, Danielle and Elizabeth, right?
Liz, yeah.
Liz, okay, you go by Liz, okay?
Yeah. Better social security net, like just amongst people that they know, people that they're aware of, they're able to hold each other accountable and also be able to not take more time off to go get medical care, but be able
No, not like what Lucy said, no.
Apologies. Be able to manage different tasks, so not that they're less stressed out, but they're able to focus better.
Okay, so they have more, people at the higher end of the spectrum might have social support, although we'll come back to we may talk about this, how the rich in our society have different kinds of social networks than the poor. Often the poor are deeply embedded in kinship networks, live amongst their friends, whereas you guys will be itinerant when you graduate from this university. You'll live far from your friends and your family. In the back, I forgot your name?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Actually, my colleagues disagree. I think people with higher socioeconomic status might be less stressed in general because they're more likely to be financially free.
Yes. So lower stress because you're rich. It's a good mechanism. Absolutely. You had, what's your name?
Yeah, I'm Sheil.
Sheil.
Yeah. I think like people who are of higher socioeconomic status might live in areas that are of higher sanitation and thus they won't have to worry about like a lot of infectious diseases.
Better geographic, that's right. Better environmental stuff. What's your name?
I'm William.
William.
And I think high socioeconomic status individuals probably are less likely to work like physically dangerous jobs.
Could be, absolutely. So occupational risk, there's 100 years of research on occupational risk. Miners and truck drivers and fishermen, I think, is one of the more dangerous jobs in our society. Yes? Boy, you guys are coming up with lots of examples. That's right. So either you've done the readings or you've learned this before or you're smart. Yeah?
One of the readings talked about
about the psychosocial factors and like how much control you have over your job and your social environment. And so like if you have like maybe a job lower in status and it's maybe more monotonous and you have less control over it, it can lead to like
Can wear you out. Yeah. All right, so you guys are generating lots of examples. We could go on, and I'm really proud and happy that you're able to generate all these examples. And in fact, these factors are no doubt important to varying degrees. Things like nutrition and sanitation, material comfort, risk behaviors, we didn't talk about this, but like risky behaviors among the poor, smoking, drug use, access to and use of medical care. Yes, Lucy, I agree. I just was giving you a little trouble. So, all of these things are things that are possible mechanisms for the effect of SES on health, but they do not explain all of the relationship, okay? For example, we've already begun to see that when it comes to the issue of healthcare, at the population level at least, more healthcare may not necessarily be the key to more health. Nevertheless, in terms of risk behaviors, here's the age-adjusted prevalence of current cigarette smoking. This was in 2000 among persons 25 years of age and older, according to educational level. And richer people are about a third as likely to smoke as poor people. And smoking is very deadly. It's really deadly. Though, if probably one or two of you are smokers, it's the best thing you can do for your health. Even better than finding a good partner, actually, is stop smoking. So this is, you can see the difference here. This is the adjusted odds ratio, probability of death. Probability of smoking, conditional on wealth, and the poor are 3 times more likely to be smokers than the rich. And here are educational differences in the extent to which people use medical care correctly, depending on their education, among diabetics. And this slide was taken from your readings, and I think that, was it William that mentioned this? It was you, Danielle.
Yeah.
All right. This slide was taken from your readings, and Danielle mentioned it. It shows the variation in various personal behaviors among diabetic patients enrolled in a very famous, large, prospective clinical trial called the Diabetes Control and Complications Trial, the DCCT. And the DCCT was a randomized prospective clinical trial that examined the effectiveness of intensive treatment of diabetes in preventing or delaying complications from the disease. So diabetes was, and to a lesser extent still is, a bad disease, okay? It causes all kinds of problems. It can cause vascular problems, so your blood vessels block up, and that affects your vision, so you can go blind, and your kidneys, you can eventually have renal failure, and can lead to amputations of your extremities. We see this less with modern treatments and modern drug delivery systems that have little servo loops that detect your sugar and inject your insulin, and you can have very normal lifespan if some of you are diabetic. I'm not suggesting that you have an awful fate, but I'm pointing out it's not a trivial disease, requires careful management. It's better now than it used to be, but it was always a challenging disease to manage. And what they did in this study between 1983 and 1989 is they enrolled 1,441 patients aged 13 to 39 years who had insulin-dependent diabetes for between 1 and 15 years, but who lacked hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, or any severe diabetic complications or medical conditions. And they were randomized to either an intensive or conventional therapy, and they were followed for, 4 to 10 years until April of 1993. And these are the baseline measures of these people. So they looked at, did you have a postgraduate degree, a college graduate, or some college or a high school degree? So these people were more educated than these people. And they looked at the number of times they self-monitored for blood glucose. So the well-educated people were monitoring their blood sugar much more often than the less well-educated. Missed an insulin injection. They were half as likely to miss an insulin injection if they had gone to college than if they had only gone to high school. Did not follow the insulin regimen. Again, less likely to occur if you were more educated. And so on. Or exercise vigorously. Minutes of hard exercise per week. The people, the educated, were much more likely to have the requisite exercise, to quit smoking, which is also very helpful if you have diabetes, and so on. Now, one way to measure diabetes severity is to look at something called the hemoglobin A1C level. And so if you're measuring a patient that has diabetes and you're trying to see how bad is their diabetes, if I just prick your finger and measure the amount of glucose in your bloodstream right now, it's not necessarily an accurate indication. You might have just eaten, for example, or maybe just gave yourself a shot of insulin so your sugar's normalizing. It's like a one moment in time measure. But instead, what I can do is I can look at the exposure of your red blood cells to free-floating sugar over time, and it turns out your red blood cells can become like sugar-coated donuts. And you can measure the hemoglobin, the amount of hemoglobin A1C, sort of like a glycosylated hemoglobin, the amount of red blood cells, how coated have they become with sugar over time. So I can measure that, and that provides a more integrated over time, more reliable measure of your diabetic control than just one particular moment. And Goldman and Smith in your readings hypothesized that imposing the intensive regimen would have a larger impact on less educated participants because of their poor self-maintenance in normal circumstances. And this is a very stringent test of their hypothesis. In other words, can we force the uneducated to do the right thing? Structure versus agency, right? We take a bunch of people who are less educated, not taking good care of themselves. We're going to see, can we redress this adverse impact of the lack of education by providing this exogenous system where they're part of this trial and getting this full court press to get them to manage their diabetes. So this now looks at the glycosylated hemoglobin level, and it looks at the conventional therapy, and it looks at baseline. So at baseline, those with a postgraduate degree had an hemoglobin A1C level of 8.42, and then by the end of the study, it had gone up just a little. So actually, the difference was 0.46. So all of these people had their hemoglobin A1C level go up slightly in the conventional therapy only. The people who just got ordinary care, they had no benefit they were in the control arm of the study. And then in the intensive treatment, they had their own particular baselines, which might have been different from these. That's fine. They were randomly assigned to this, but we have to measure their own particular baselines. And then we see what happens at the end of the study, 7.18. They're going down in each of these arms. So the educated and the uneducated all decline, which is good news. Now we compute the difference in the treatment arm. We see among the educated, the hemoglobin A1C dropped by 0.85. Among those with college, this is what happened. And among those with high school and some secondary, this is what happened. Everyone with me still? And now we subtract this number from this number. So we have to do a difference in difference. We have to say, here's the difference in the treatment arm, and here's the difference that would have occurred anyway in the control arm. So we subtract this from this, and now we get the grand finale. We see how much more did the hemoglobin A1C fall in the treatment arm than in the control arm. Is everyone with me? And then we look at these numbers, and what we see is it really fell a lot in those with low education. And it was benefit, but not as much benefit in those with a postgraduate degree. So that is, the impact of enforcing a common treatment regimen can be discerned by subtracting what normally would occur, the control sample, with what took place under an enforced treatment regimen, the treatment sample. And these results, which are listed in the final row, demonstrate that enforced treatment had a much larger impact on less educated patients. Okay? So you can redress the adverse impact of education by doing this, first point. And second, subtle point, is the ability to fix the deficits caused by education doing this, give you an insight into what the lack of education might have been doing in the first place. That the lack of education might have been interfering with the ability of these people to take good care of themselves. So it provides you a mechanistic insight. Like if I said to you, what evidence is there that low education causes poor diabetic management, self-management? You could say, well, when we force the uneducated to have good self-management, we efface the difference between the uneducated and the educated. Does everyone understand? By the way, when I say uneducated and educated and rich and poor, I speak in this telegraphic way during lecture to just make it simpler to fix ideas. I don't literally mean these people are uneducated and they're only relatively uneducated, and I don't mean that if you need to have a postgraduate degree to be educated, yada, yada. Okay, so provisos apply, but it's just clear to speak in this way. Which of you guys sleep on your backs? Raise your hand if you sleep on your backs. Okay, that's the minority. Who sleeps on their sides? Who sleeps on their bellies? And people sleep in different positions. And this is a decidedly non-scientific study that was done. I can't find scientific studies. If any of you ever, by the way, if you guys ever encounter anything in lecture that makes you think of something else and you want to help me improve the class, send it to me. But I can't find any scientific studies of sleeping positions. This is a non-scientific study, and this is the fetal position, 41%. The back, where's the back? This soldier, 8%, that's about you guys. Free fall, 7%, and nostalgic, and so on. A starfish, that seems like a ridiculous posture to me. The question, however, is what if you don't force people to do the right thing, like in the DCCT trial? What if you offer instead a free, easy, life-saving intervention like the Back to Sleep campaign that was in your readings? So in your readings, at a specific moment in time, I forgot when it was. When was the anti-SIDS? Yeah, in 1984. So there was a problem with sudden infant death syndrome where a lot of babies were dying. And the reason they were dying is their parents were putting them face down in the crib. And who knows, can babies move? No, this is a great thing about babies, is that until they start to move, you put them somewhere and then you come back an hour later and they're still there. They can't go anywhere. And then they learn to walk, and then that's a real problem. Because then you have to, fireproof your house and you got to watch them all the time. It's exhausting. But until that time, you put a baby down and it doesn't go anywhere, okay? So if you put a baby down, face down, it can barely turn its head, so it can smother to death. So in order to, and there was an epidemic of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, in our country and elsewhere. And scientists discovered that if you put the baby on their back, they were less likely to die. So they were like, well, let's tell the American people about this amazing discovery, this free, easy, life-saving intervention. We're going to teach people to put their public health intervention, structure versus agency. We're going to teach people to put their babies on their back by doing the Back to Sleep campaign. So now let's look at different groups. Let's just pick whites here, just for the sake of argument. This is SIDS cases per 1,000 births. And we're going to look at 1989 to 1991, before the campaign. And we're going to look at the gradient by education. And next week I'm going to have a new pointer. Oh, for God's sakes. I don't know why it's all... Anyway, so you can see from left to right is more and more education. So the more educated people have lower rates of their children dying of SIDS. And then you can look at the poorest group versus the richest group, and you can see that this number is about 2.5, and this number is about 0.5. So poor people had 5 times the death rate from SIDS as rich people did, as educated people did. I'm sorry. So educated people had, uneducated people had 5 times the rate. Uneducated white people had 5 times the rate of SIDS compared to educated people before the Back to Sleep campaign. Is everyone with me? Mm-hmm. Then the Back to Sleep campaign rolls out. What happens? Everyone's probability of death goes down. Everyone is benefiting. White babies are dying in lower numbers. So are black babies. Fewer babies are dying. It's great news. But now, if you divide this number here, which is 1.75, by this number, 0.25, you see that the gap has widened. The educated people uneducated people have 7 times the death rate as educated people. Before, they had 5 times the death rate, even though both groups have widened. Do you understand? Inequality has gone up, even though everyone is better off. This is going to be a fundamental tension. You're going to see many examples of this in the course, and I don't have the right answer for this. Generally, I prefer this. I will take inequality for everyone being better off. But even me, sometimes it makes me uncomfortable, okay? When you get these widening differentials when you're rolling out a public health intervention. And I'm going to push you guys. You'll get some delicious examples soon. And you also can see here a bunch of other stuff. The higher death rates of blacks and lower death rates in Hispanics, despite their lower socioeconomic status compared with whites. So it's very interesting. This is the first hint we're going to see of something called the Hispanic paradox. where so all of these numbers are higher for blacks than they are for whites, but all of the Hispanic groups do better than whites. Okay, so there's not some simple like ethno-racial stratification of our society. For many health outcomes, Hispanics outperform whites, and this is one of the first indications we've seen in the class for this phenomenon. Okay, so although the risks of SIDS have been reduced in all social classes, women who are more educated had experienced the greatest decline. Once again, those who were more educated were better able to take advantage of new knowledge coming into the society. They were seizing it and acting on it. And there are two possible and not mutually exclusive explanations for this phenomenon. Either the information about infant sleep position is not being disseminated as fully to women in low social class groups. That would be bad, right? If we were only whispering it to educated people, put your kids back to sleep on their backs. And keeping that information from the poor or not trying to give that would be bad. Or it's reaching everybody, but uneducated people, for whatever reason, got the right advice, but didn't listen. And then what do you do? Do you need a totalitarian state? Do I send the police into your house to force you to put your baby to sleep in a particular way? Or not, right? I have to make sure I get you the information, but if you don't act on it, what am I supposed to do about that? Another tension we'll revisit. Merit.
Yes. So I had a question because in the same reading, it mentioned that because the elementary school women had better outcomes, or like their children had less SIDS, they explained that women with typically just elementary school education are usually foreign born. I was wondering what you make of that reasoning.
I don't remember those details, that level of detail of this paper. But if they were foreign born, they may have had different norms about how you put babies to sleep, and they may also make co-sleep. In our society, well-educated people tend to put the baby in another room or in a bassinet in the same room. Whereas, in many other societies, parents sleep with a child. So if the kid stops breathing, what does mom do? She wakes up right away. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't remember that detail in the paper, but that's possible. Other thoughts on this? Now, it's important to realize that the relationship between SES and health could actually run in the opposite direction. And this is the issue of reverse causation, or two-way causation, or as is sometimes known in statistics or econometrics, endogeneity, when two things are combined, they're mixed together. Each are causing the other. And more generally, when one observes associations in the world, it does not imply cause necessarily, right? Correlation does not equal causation. One of the things that irritates me the most is I'm a pretty decent scientist, and when I do studies and I tweet about them or something, these reply guys show up and say, well, correlation is not causation, professor. I'm like, really? You think I don't know this? Yes. So, but you guys have all heard correlation is not causation. When we observe an association between two phenomena in the world, how can we know whether one is causing the other or not? We, would have to do some specialized kinds of analyses to be certain. And when it comes to wealth, there isn't just a correlation across individuals whereby healthy people are richer. There's also an association across time within individuals wherein healthy people get richer. That is, better health is associated with greater wealth and also greater increases in wealth in the future. And these data come from your readings, and we can look at initial health and initial and subsequent wealth status. So you look at people who at baseline are in these four categories of health, and you look at their wealth status. I guess this is their what is it called? Their someone's wealth, their net assets. I forgot the term I'm looking for right now. And you can see, no surprise, the poor people have less. But then you look across time at what happens, and the people in the excellent health, they double their amount of wealth, and the poor people even decline. Okay? So that suggests across time within people that health can actually cause wealth. It's not just wealth causing health. So now let me ask you, how might health affect wealth? The opposite question that we asked you a few minutes ago. How might health affect wealth? What's your name again?
Ben.
Ben.
Yeah. Medical care is very expensive. People who are unhealthy, might have a lot of medical costs.
Yeah, so what you're saying is people in poor health are spending their money on healthcare and therefore get less over time. Absolutely, okay? What's your name?
Kara.
Kara?
Yeah, so I guess if you have like maybe a critical health condition, then you won't really be able to go into work and then
Yeah.
kind of take away time.
Yeah, so you're unable to work, so you can't work and you don't accumulate as much wealth. I forgot your name?
Tanisha. I was going to say.
I'm sorry, say your name again?
Tanisha.
Tanisha?
I was going to say the same thing as Kara. If
Okay.
you're healthy, you're able to work more. You're able to eat.
You get a better job, accumulate more money, and so on. Other ideas?
Emily,
Emily.
if you're in poor health, maybe you know you're gonna die soon, so you spend all your money.
Oh, there's a good subtle one. Very good. Yes, that's right. The utility of consumption goes up a lot if you're facing imminent death. That's right. Lucy.
Maybe if you're very healthy, you're also very beautiful, which can make it easier for you to get promotions at work.
We're going to come back to appearance, actually, because sort of beauty privilege is one of the things that's least often discussed, but it's a kind of social stratification that is very powerful in our society. And you're absolutely right that, otherwise similar people with the same education, the same quality of mind, unaccountably, the prettier and handsomer ones get paid more. So to the extent that poor health is correlated with or even causes compromised physical appearance, it could also affect this, and other mechanisms that you guys could imagine. So here are some possible mechanisms for the effect of poor health on SES. Reduced education or training, spending down of people's savings, or loss of earnings or work opportunities. And so first of all, poor health could result in limitations of opportunities for education or training. Those that are uncoordinated or blind or diabetic or mentally ill and so on may receive lesser educations or have fewer opportunities both early and late in life. And health can affect wealth in other ways as well. Here's what happens in a sample of adults in their 50s when there's a major illness such as cancer or stroke. This slide shows various changes over an interval of 4 years in the Health and Retirement Survey, which was a prospective study of about 22,000 people in their 50s. And it looks at total medical expenses were $28,000, out-of-pocket expenses $2,000. This is old data now from 20 some odd years ago. So there's a decline in wealth simply because of consuming resources, as one of you said. I forgot, Ben, over here. Eventually I'll get all of your names. But one of the things you guys will do, which will make it harder for me, is start scrambling where you sit. So it's a little, anyway, it's like Sudoku. But so you're spending down your money. New episodes of poor health lead to lower wealth accumulation, but we've not yet said why. And it turns out it's not the actual expenses, it's the decreased ability to work. So the main driver is not so much that you're spending down your money, the main driver is that you can't work. And of course, as most of you have probably been anticipating, the relationship between SES and health is actually both ways. And it also depends a bit on what socioeconomic measure, what health measure, what stage of life, and what time horizon we are considering. And it's important, regardless, to also exclude a problem of inference, of statistical inference and causal observation, known as third factor confounding. So what if I told you that observing people who watch TV a lot are more likely to have heart attacks? Do we think that there's some waves that are coming out of the television and are penetrating your chest and the radiation is affecting your heart vessels and that's what's causing them? No, we don't think that's the problem. What do we think? We think that TV viewing is a marker for having a sedentary lifestyle, right? Those people who are sedentary are more likely to watch TV. And that it's the sedentary lifestyle that's causing the heart attack, not the TV viewing. Okay? So sedentary lifestyle causes TV viewing, sedentary lifestyle causes heart attacks. Now we falsely conclude that TV viewing is the cause of heart attacks, but that's not what's going on. There's a third factor, which is the joint cause of both the TV viewing and the heart attack. And so in the case of SES and health, not only can there be two-way causation, but it can be more complicated still. Maybe there's some unobserved personality traits, like, anal people, right? People who are like, really regimented in their lives, type A personalities or whatever, maybe they accumulate more wealth or have higher status, and maybe they also have better health, and we falsely conclude that SES is causing health or vice versa, where it's not that at all. It's some other underlying trait. For example, intelligence. Something you're assigned at birth, by and large. Maybe intelligent people have higher SES. We know that's true. And maybe intelligent people have higher health. I'm going to show you evidence that that's true as well. So maybe that's what's going on here. Of course, the fact that that's happening doesn't mean the other things aren't happening. It just means it's a complication. It's yet another possible explanation for the SES and health relationship. Or our genes, for example. We may have genes that you're born with that are correlated with or cause high socioeconomic status, and those same genes are correlated or cause good health. So it's not that SES is causing health, it's some third factor, your genotype, that is conferring both of these advantages. Now, in an ideal situation, what we would like to do is to somehow do experiments where we give people wealth and see what health results from it. So the only way to be certain about these things is to do a randomized control trial and experiment. I take you guys and I give you $1 million each, and you guys get nothing, and then I come back 10 years later and see what fraction of you are alive and what fraction of you are alive, and aha, those of you given $1 million have lived much longer than those of you that have not. Now, if we cannot do this artificially, perhaps we might be able to find a natural experiment, like the doctor strikes we discussed a couple of lectures ago. Can anyone think of a natural experiment in random assignment of wealth? Ben? Lotteries. Okay, but let's think about that a little bit more. What if I find that people who play lotteries, would they be more likely to die than people who don't play lotteries? Yes. Yeah, they'd be more likely to die because typically poor people play lotteries. So it's not exactly lotteries that I want. What do I want?
Those who win the lottery.
Those who win. Who speak up? Who? What's your name again? You. You have to keep reminding me. I'm sorry. And I know I'm forgetting your name and I shouldn't. So you want conditional on playing the lottery. We take a group of people who play. So you guys don't play the lottery, but these guys do. Among these guys who play the lottery, I see who is randomly chosen to win. And then I say, aha, you were randomly assigned some money. Do you live longer? Okay? And unsurprisingly, social scientists have done exactly those studies. And there have been quite a few papers in this regard. Here's longitudinal data regarding a random sample of Brits who received a medium-sized lottery wins of between 1,000 and 120,000 pounds, which is up to approximately $200,000 when the study was done. So, 20 years ago now, or 15 years ago. And they're compared here to two control groups. One was a group with no wins, and the other is a group with small wins, of lesser amounts. And these individuals go on to eventually exhibit significantly better, psychological outcomes. So we look at a natural experiment. This is conditional on playing the lottery. This is a measure of stress in individuals, a kind of mental health measure. And the people who won big winnings, they had a significant improvement in their mental health compared to people who had low winnings or no winnings. Okay? So being randomly assigned some money at least improves your mental health in this study. 2 years after the lottery win, the average measured improvement in mental well-being is 1.4 GHQ points on a 36-point scale. And to provide a better feel for the size of this effect, it can be compared to becoming widowed, which is associated with a worsening in people's mental health on average of approximately 5 GHQ points. So the benefits of winning this modest-sized lottery of $200,000 was a third as positive as losing your spouse is negative. That's a pretty big effect, right? Getting this money in this situation. And the nature of the interrelationship of health and SES, and in particular income, could indeed be life stage specific. Early in life, SES can affect health at both the early point and also have lingering effects, whereas later in life it could be the reverse, as we saw with the HRS data. So it could be life stage specific. So during birth and adolescence, when you're young, what's really driving the relationship is measures of SES are affecting your health, whereas later in life, the primary arrow may be in the opposite direction. Are there any questions so far? We're keeping up? All right. Now, since the factors we considered earlier, behaviors, nutrition, access to healthcare, and so forth, appear to account for only a portion of the putative effect of socioeconomic status on health, people have begun to take a look at a variety of other intriguing explanations. We're going to cover some of these in the class. In utero exposures and marking. These are other ideas about how SES may affect health. So-called third factors, which I already alluded to, like intelligence. And another set of ideas, which we'll discuss at length in the class, I think we'll have a whole lecture on it, having to do with social hierarchy. And the first on this list is something known as the Barker hypothesis. The Barker hypothesis states that nutritional or other deprivation in utero may lead to preferential blood flow to critical organs and the deprivation of other body parts, setting up problems in later life with metabolism, the coagulation system, and the cardiovascular system. So the idea is that babies in women, which women are suffering from various sorts of deprivation, such as nutritional deprivation, those babies, as they're growing in the mother's uterus, blood is preferentially shunted to the brain to preserve the important organ. Would be a natural, physiologic, adaptive, evolved, biological response in our species. And as a result, the rest of their body is harmed or is prepared to live in a time of famine. So there's disproportionate growth in different parts of the body. And these conditions in later life could contribute to higher risks of diabetes or cardiovascular disease and so on. And actually, similar work has been done with other kinds of situations. If you imagine it from the point of view of Darwinian evolution, the body you were given when you were in utero, your body was shaped by a number of factors. It was shaped primarily by your genes, and you're growing in your mother's uterus. And but now your mother is exposed to a famine, like during the Second World War in Amsterdam. So from an evolutionary point of view, you would want the organism to be able to transmit some information to the fetus about the kind of world the fetus was going to enter. Hey, fetus, you're about to enter a world, there's not much food. So you need to be calorie conserving. You need the kind of body that can live in a world in which there are not a lot of calories. But then that baby is born, it might be born into a world in which there are lots of calories. So their body, now prepared for a world in which there are not lots of calories, finds itself in a world with lots of calories and gets obese and diabetic and has all kinds of health problems because of the in utero exposure that the baby had, a response to the challenges which was adaptive, right? Because if the baby had been born into an ongoing famine, that baby would have fared better. Do you understand? Hold on. Joseph?
Yeah.
All right.
Do these happen usually only one generation at a time? Or let's say the baby gets screwed over.
Yeah. Screwed over being a technical term for what we're discussing here.
Yeah. Now has a lot of health problems, diabetes, everything.
Yes.
Their children also.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just generational.
Yes. And the whole intergenerational transmission is a very complex, sad, and real phenomenon that is a complex intersection of biology and sociology, where there's absolutely these biological effects and intergenerational transmission. We're going to actually see a bunch of studies about this. Like, for example, parents that are stunted who would have been smarter but they were exposed to in utero, they are unable to raise their own kids properly. Their parents were doing drugs while they were in utero. It screwed up their brains. Now they get pregnant. You get a social transmission that starts as a biological phenomenon. You can also get a biological transmission that starts as a social phenomenon, and you can have ongoing biological transmission. We'll come back to some examples later in the course where, like the stunted example you just said, you were stunted because you were born. It means you can't bring to bear a child that is not stunted. Your child is a little bit more stunted, and so on. So you can have intergenerational transmission, which is really sad and devastating. Hold on, Sophia.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that there were certain signals that were sent. So, for example, if the mother's pregnant during World War II, with not so much food available, it would send signals to the baby. How does that affect the baby? Is it
So what happens, the biology of it is complex and I don't know it offhand, but the gist of it is that you get preferential blood flow, the baby's starving in utero, and nutrients, yes. So the blood vessels are dilated that provide blood to the brain and constricted in the growing fetus to the rest of the body. So you have, let's say, the pancreas doesn't develop normally because as the little tiny fetal pancreas is beginning to form, it's not getting all the blood supply that it needs. And so this baby is born with a pancreas with different kind of ability to secrete insulin. That's the gist.
Because those organs are underdeveloped, that
Correct.
expose them to diabetes.
Correct. Or other problems, mental illness and so on. Exactly. Did I answer your question? Merritt.
I was going to ask maybe a silly question, but like, would you say that the opposite can also be true? Where, like, do we know that children who maybe had a very rich nutritional environment or like in the fetal environment have really well-functioning organs?
I think it would depend on whether you consider what the baseline state of human beings is. So if you consider fully fed to be normal, then that would set the upper limit and everything else would be worse than that.
Gotcha.
If you consider average feeding to be normal, then yes, then the ones that are above average would be better than the average, better than the lower. But I like to think of us in our ancestral environment. If you look at studies of hunter-gatherers around the world, if you look, for example, at the Hadza, which are a group that I've studied, the Hadza hunter-gatherers around, we'll talk about them later in the course, around Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, actually the babies are born pretty healthy. They have plenty of calories. That's not their problem. They have other issues, but that's not their problem.
So you're saying there is like an upper limit?
Well, yeah, I don't think I could miraculously, if you're thinking of getting pregnant and you want to know if you take vitamins and eat extra milkshakes, will your baby be a genius? No, I don't think that. No, I don't think you can push it above what your destiny, in your case, already is. Yeah. Hold on, let me remember your name. Michelle? No, what's your name? Natalie.
I was wondering why, so if you have like a starved baby and then they end up getting diabetes later, but then why does that pass on to the next generation? And
because that diabetic mom now has her uterus isn't as healthy as it would have been otherwise. It's also stunted. So its baby then is genetically would have been fine, but it's now growing up in a uterus that because of the grandmother's exposure to a famine is going to cause problems for it.
So there's no way that it could be reversible for the next
Well, not if your body's been marked by these exposures. That's right.
Okay.
That's unfortunately, yeah. Now you can do stuff to remediate it, and we're going to talk about this conceptually and practically. How we as a society cope with some of these biosocial insults that have accrued to human beings, and what's the policy requirement and even the moral mandate that we redress some of these problems. We could talk a lot about that, but we can't always redress them. That's exactly right. Kara? No, I'm scrambling you guys now.
It's okay, I moved seats. My name's Rena.
Lucy. I'm sorry.
Rena.
Okay, Rena.
Yes.
Okay.
I know that, for example, now we're seeing marriage trends where people tend to marry within their social status. I was wondering if this is also passed down with the father. What we were talking about conditions.
Yeah. So there's genetic quality to sperm, absolutely, and older fathers they give. I think I alluded to this earlier in the class. I give some examples. We'll talk about more examples later. If you're the offspring of older dads, your health status is worse than if you're the offspring of younger dads. Same with older moms and younger moms. It's true for both. The woman's much more important, obviously, in the production of a baby than the man. So the female stuff is a bigger driver than the male stuff, but the males also play a role. And hold on, there was something else you asked, and I wanted to answer it about the males and. I forgot. How did you frame your question?
Yeah, I framed it because I understand that people are increasingly marrying.
Oh, within, exactly. Yeah, this is a big and complex topic. So, and one of the ironies is, wonderfully in our society, we had a dramatic decline in sexism, even in my lifetime. And we've redressed, to a very substantial extent, gender-based discrimination in our society. So when I was at Yale, we were just celebrating the 10th anniversary of coeducation at Yale. Girls were allowed in. and that was, and now, right, we take it for granted. There's no plausible reason why women wouldn't be allowed to come to Yale. But weirdly, one of the side effects of this is that we now have heightened SES endogamy in our society. There was more mixing in marriage between social classes in my parents' generation and in my generation than in your generation. So you guys tend to have endogamy. Endogamy means marrying like-minded within your group. Exogamy, these are terms from anthropology, marrying. Who's taken a class in anthropology? Yale's very strong in anthropology. Anthropology is a magnificent discipline. Sometimes it gets overly politicized, but there's phenomenal insights. So some groups marry outside the group, that's called exogamy. Some groups marry inside the group, that's called endogamy. You guys will have socioeconomic endogamy, and actually this has a number of implications for across time. The babies of the rich are getting better and better than the babies of the poor. You brought this up. It's true. It's happening because you have less social mixing. A poor person is going to now marry a poor person, whereas in the prior generation they might have married a rich person. So their genes would have been passed on and mixed. You see what I'm saying? So this is. I don't want to say it's a problem. It is a problem. I mean, like so many of these things, it's like it's a feature of our social world. And I don't know quite how to describe it or respond to it. It doesn't make me happy that this is happening, but what am I going to do? Mandate marriages in our society, or remove the progress of women in our society? Yes. I forgot your name.
Kara.
Kara.
Yeah.
Hold on. Is there two Karas? No. No. Okay.
Well, I feel like it's more and more. It seems like addressing health becomes like kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense, because at first it's like, oh, we should change your diet, but then there's other factors influencing that, and other factors influencing that, like socioeconomic status, and is there a way to or is there an approach to address these fundamental causes, I guess, that
It's really, you read, and the fundamental causes paper, the Lincoln Phelan paper, which I think was assigned for today, is a magnificent, subtle idea, isn't it? And both very explanatory, but also very depressing, because it suggests that, like she uses the example of a balloon. You're saying we got to fix socioeconomic inequalities. We need to give money to poor people. If we give money to poor people, then they won't suffer as much, and they won't die so early. So you give money to poor people, but they still die. You squeeze the balloon here, and then the problem goes over there, and then you squeeze it there, and then it goes over here. We're going to come, and it's because things like socioeconomic status, as Lincoln Phelan argue, are fundamental causes. And there's a very deep insight there, which I'll return to in just a moment. Did I answer your question or not really? Yeah. And we're going to learn about some of this as well later in the class with these in utero exposures. We're going to talk about something called social epigenetics, which is like in the second, third, or fourth class before the end. There's some readings and we'll come back to that. Second here, there may be other factors we are born with, such as innate intelligence, that are associated, as I said, both with our SES and our risk of death. And third is another idea we'll explore at greater length later in the course. And the focus on the role of hierarchy stresses both relative position in society and also position in immediate social networks, like how you stand with respect to your immediate peers. It's not your absolute standing in terms of your education or wealth that matters, it's your relative standing. So if you're a rich person in a poor neighborhood, that might be better than being a slightly richer person in an even much richer neighborhood. So your relative standing. You don't have to. I have a whole lecture about this. So if you're if you have $100,000 in a neighborhood where everyone is earning $20,000, that might be better for you than having $200,000 in a neighborhood when everyone earns $1 million. So in the $200,000 example, you have more money, absolutely, but relatively you're poor compared to your surroundings. So your immediate surroundings may play a role in addition to your absolute ranking, let's say in the whole nation. Part of the motivation for thinking this is that the relationship between education and income and health has persisted forever, even despite the substantial rise in education and income for all people in the United States. In other words, we're still observing a education-health relationship today, which is not a lot different than was observed in people 100 years ago, even though we're all more educated and we're all richer and we're all healthier than we were 100 years ago. So there's something deep and fundamental about this relationship, right? It's still there, despite all the progress that we've made on multiple fronts. And the Barker hypotheses, these are data from 2,785 male Finnish babies that were born at term in the Helsinki University Hospital in 1924 to 1933. This shows SMRs, or standardized mortality ratios, according to something called the ponderal index, which is how plump the baby is. And the SMR is the number of observed deaths divided by expected deaths. In this case, the number of deaths that would have been expected based on the whole sample and the numbers in each row. And what you see here is a strong trend in coronary heart disease with ponderal index. Men who were thin at birth had death rates that were twice those of men who were plumper at birth, decades earlier. These data suggest that restricted growth in utero is associated with an increased risk of coronary heart disease. So if your mother endured a famine or was malnourished while she was pregnant with you, you will be marked through no fault of your own. Moreover, other work by this research group has shown that men who grow slowly in utero remain biologically different than other men. They are more vulnerable to the effects of low socioeconomic status and low income on coronary heart disease. There's an interaction between being born small and being poor later in life that compounds to make health even worse. Conversely, men who are not thin at birth were more resilient to the later effects of poor living standards at subsequent points in their lives. But the Barker hypothesis only kicks in if you actually survive. Oh my God, once again, I got so chatty with you guys. I'm looking ahead here and I'd like a lot more things I want to say. The Barker hypothesis only kicks in if you actually survive your infancy. You could, of course, just die to begin with. These are the rates of neonatal deaths per 1,000 births according to Maternal Race and Education in the United States in 1998. And you can see once again, we see that Hispanics do better than whites, actually, certainly better than blacks, better than Native Americans. Here are Asian and Pacific Islanders, so the classic ethno-racial division in our society. You can look at differences across race and differences by mother's education, and you look at deaths per 1,000, and within each racial group, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to die. Okay? Now, second, let's consider a third factor example. And several hypotheses have been proposed to explain the associations between intelligence and later risk of mortality. The suggested causal mechanisms put forward, in which cognitive ability is the exposure and disease or death is the outcome, include mediation by adverse or protective health behaviors in adulthood, so smarter people may smoke less or may get more physical activity, disease management and health literacy, smarter people may manage their illnesses better, and adult socioeconomic status. Smarter people have different occupational hazards or more money. And recent evidence of a genetic contribution to the association between general cognitive ability and longevity also supports what's known as the system integrity theory, that posits that a latent trait of optimal bodily functioning is indicated by both cognitive test performance and disease biomarkers. So it's like having a good body, and not having a good body, you have a smart body and you have a healthy body, like the ancient Greeks, sound mind and sound body. So there's some genotype that's associated with this. This is this theory, okay? And there's evidence for this theory. And none of these possibilities are mutually exclusive. And your readings included a prospective cohort study based on a whole population of participants born in Scotland in 1936 and linked to mortality data across 68 years of follow-up. And they found that childhood intelligence was inversely associated with all major causes of death. And the age and sex-adjusted hazard ratios per one standard deviation, or about 15 IQ points, advantage in intelligence test scores were strongest for coronary heart disease and stroke. So here are 6 outcomes taken from your readings. You look at, what is the risk of death? The smarter you are, and the smarter you are, the less likely you are to die of cardiovascular disease, smoking-related cancers, no real effect on non-smoking-related cancers. That's a hint that the way that intelligence is reducing the risk of cancer death is by getting you to stop smoking. Some of these other non-smoking cancers, they occur regardless of how smart you are, and so on. These are all images taken from your readings. let's see, where am I? And to be clear, these early life effects need not be genetic. There's increasing evidence, including based on experiments, where poor people in the developing world are literally just given cash. So like go to developing world settings, we give poor people money and then we see what happens to their health afterwards. Or natural experiments, for example, crop failures. So you go to a part of the world, you look at where there's a crop failure, and you have an otherwise similar part where there wasn't a crop failure. For the hypothesis, these types of studies support the hypothesis that poverty can have particular psychological consequences and physiologic sequelae. For example, your cortisol levels. If you're poor, you're more stressed, you have higher cortisol levels, you're constantly in a state like this, which like can harm your body, and that's how poverty gets under your skin and can contribute to your death. Or poverty can lead to economic behaviors that make it difficult to escape poverty. So if you look at the impact of poverty on human psychology, when you're poor, you take more risks. You discount your risks, right? So poor people do stupid things, we think. Again, I'm speaking telegraphically. I don't mean that poor people are stupid. I'm just saying, they take more risks, okay? Or you're time discounting. Someone else was saying, remember your name again? Emily. As Emily said earlier, maybe you live a life of just spend your money. So if you're poor, I give you money. Many people say, why do poor people spend all their money on big TVs and cars? Well, if you're poor, that's some of the pleasure you can get from having a big TV and a car. You have no real interest in saving money. It can affect your affect. You get really stressed if you're poor, and affect your mood, and have all these sorts of effects, which then can feed on themselves and make it harder to escape poverty. The evidence indicates that poverty causes stress and negative affective states, which in turn may lead to short-sighted and risk-averse decision-making, possibly by limiting attention and favoring habitual behaviors at the expense of goal-directed ones. So by risk-averse, I meant that they take certain risks with their lives, but they don't take certain risks in terms of occupational opportunities, which might limit them. If you're rich, you can afford to take a risk and make an investment. If you're poor, you can't take such a risk. And finally, I mentioned the social hierarchy example, and I'm going to come back to that, so I'm going to skip that for now. So you could actually sketch out a whole life course model regarding how different aspects of SES affect different aspects of physiology at different stages in a person's life. You can have socioeconomic positions that affects intrauterine conditions, which affects your state at birth, like low birth weight and growth retardation, which might contribute to atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, which contributes to cardiovascular disease and reduced functioning. Or socioeconomic position might affect your education and environmental conditions in childhood, like make you prone to smoking, diet, and exercise behaviors, and so on, in this very complex model where everything is so, interlocked. And not all disparities are the same, either in magnitude or in importance. And some of these should seem more unfair to you than others. So disparities that arise due to race or ethnicity often seem much more unfair than those that arise due to income, because you're kind of assigned your race or ethnicity at birth. You really have absolutely no control over that. Whereas, your income, maybe you have some control. So a society that discriminates based on ethno-racial categories would seem to be more unjust than a society that discriminates based on income. Not to say that any of this is good, but you can imagine different ways you might see things depending on how your model of this biosocial system was. And disparities arising at birth seem very unfair. It seems like every baby born should have an equal chance at a healthy life. And the point is, we cannot change the natural lottery of genetic endowments and biological circumstances at birth, though we can compensate for the natural lottery. And we can surely try to fix the social lottery, right? Things that affect your life prospects that are due to social arrangements would seem particularly unjust and unfair. And we can address those even if we cannot necessarily fix things that are assigned to you at birth because of biology. Plus, as Smith points out, it may be much more effective in terms of policy and money to address problems early rather than late in life. And ROI may be much higher than the billions we spend on Medicare, as we saw 2 lectures ago. Finally, in some formulations, SES can include the other traits you are born with, such as sex, whether you're a man or a woman, attractiveness, and intelligence, all of which can affect your life prospects profoundly. And we've seen already a little bit about this with respect to intelligence, and someone brought up attractiveness earlier, and it really matters a lot. It's a well-known fact that physical appearance is an important predictor of success in life.